Dr. Samuel Staley is the Director of Urban and Land Use Policy at the Reason Foundation. It's a nonprofit think tank advancing free minds and free markets. He speaks regularly throughout the U.S. and abroad, giving speeches on urban policy and transportation, testifying before federal and state legislative committees, and providing expert perspective to the news media. Staley is the author of several books, most recently with Adrian Moore, Mobility First, A New Vision for Transportation in a Globally Competitive 21st Century. That's a lot of words. I think you could have cut down a little bit. Governor Rick Perry has said Staley and Moore get it right, and the World Urban Bank Planner, Adrian Bartreau, has called it a must-read for urban managers of large cities in the United States and around the world. In addition to the academic and policy work, Staley teaches graduate and undergraduate urban economics as an adjunct professor at the Department of Economics and Finance at the University of Dayton. He's also a senior fellow at the Indiana Policy Review and the Buckeye Institute for Public Policy Solutions. Staley received a BA in Economics and Public Policy from Colby College, Master of Science in Social and Applied Economics from Wright State University, and a PhD in Public Administration with concentrations in Urban and Planning and Public Finance from Ohio State University. I give you Dr. Samuel Staley. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to the American Dream Coalition for having me at the great conference again, and the Washington Policy Center for allowing me to keynote tonight and talk a little bit about transportation policy. It really is a pleasure to be here in the Seattle area. I read a lot about it, and I wish I had been here a little more often, but it's been great over the last several days to learn a lot more about this region and the particular challenges that you have. So what I'll be talking about tonight, and actually some of the challenges you have are not the same that we face in other cities, and I will try to position some of my talk a little bit to focus on some of the more specific problems that you face. But just because you have challenges, I hope you leave tonight realizing you can do something about those challenges. You know, there's one thing that's come across to me over the last couple of days among the people that live here, is there's this sense that we're not able to get the things we need done. But actually, what I came to, as I was doing my research and background, looking at Seattle, you've got quite a few things that are in the hopper, or that can happen, and it's a question of really bringing the leadership together to make it happen. And I want to talk about some of that. A big part of what I'll be talking about is looking at transportation policy on sort of a 35,000-foot level. But the reality is we have to bring this down to the ground level to make it work. And one of the reasons I work at the Reason Foundation is because we are focused on practical solutions to problems. So it's not just about the theory. It's about how you actually make it work. And here I'll make a confession. I'm not really a transportation planner. I'm an urban economist. And even though I've got a PhD in public administration, where my profession has been focused is on cities. And I cut my teeth on revitalizing cities. And it wasn't until about working in that area for about 10 or 15 years I started thinking about cities more broadly than that, began to think about suburbs, began to think about how the region comes together. Started working internationally, did some work in Hong Kong. Now we're actually, even at Reason, we're looking at urban development and transportation in China. But all of that is what I've found is, I'm not an engineer. I am a policy person. I'm interested in seeing cities grow. And I think that the growth of cities, so goes the national economy. So this is not a trivial issue for me. In fact, I have a lot of personal and professional effort invested in this issue. And that sort of brings me back to transportation. So if I'm really a cities guy, why did I write 2 books on transportation? Well, anybody who's had the chance, the pleasure of being in that dynamic undergraduate classroom of urban economics knows how thrilling it is when you get to the transportation chapter. I mean, literally, I spend a third of the time with my graduate students as well as my undergraduate students talking about transportation. It's critical. I mean, the bottom line is that cities cannot exist without transportation. Regions cannot exist without transportation. And as we began starting the project at the Reason Foundation to focus on transportation issues, what really I brought to the discussion was the sense of how cities grow. And so it's not, for me, it's not just about the technology, about how we get tolls on roads, or for that matter, building the bridge. The important thing is building the right infrastructure in the right place at the right time. Because if you don't do that, it doesn't make any difference. You're actually going to undermine the economic competitiveness of our cities. Now, a little more context about me. I come from the Midwest. Not exactly in the forefront of job creation in the United States. So that's one reason why I started focusing on revitalization early in my career. Because my question is, I actually live in Dayton, Ohio, which is actually setting these standards for, we solved the congestion problem. We emptied out our city. I don't recommend it. I really don't think that's the strategy you need. But these are the hard problems, in my view, and that's what attracted me to this issue. And what I increasingly began to recognize, particularly over the last 15 years, is that we need to start focusing a lot more on making our cities competitive. We've really banked a lot on just some entrepreneurship, just innovation that's just come through our economy and some of the talent that we have in the nation. But as we increasingly look globally, and we begin thinking that it's not just someone in Seattle having a company that hires someone in Bellevue, or Redmond hiring someone in Seattle to come out to Redmond, or whatever it might be. We are competing with Bangalore, India. We are competing with Beijing, China. And when you've got the technology that's in your Palm Pilot, it may have been produced, actually probably produced in China someplace, but then the company may be headquartered in the Silicon Valley, but they actually contracted out all the engineering, software engineering talent to India. You're in a very different world. Certainly a different world than what I grew up in, what my family grew up in the Midwest. And transportation fits into that. In fact, I would argue, and I will argue, that transportation is more important now than it's ever been. It's important in a different context. It's no longer getting the natural resources to the factory. It's getting people to move around efficiently. And that's really what I'm going to talk about mainly tonight, is sort of thinking about, and that's this new vision stuff, which we worked with our publisher and the marketing department to figure out what that would be. But we talked about, the real book's title is Mobility First, so we'll just stop there. But really what it entails is really thinking differently about how transportation fits into the city, how it fits into the individual. Now, part of this also is going back to another core problem, which is when we started this issue, and there's this conventional wisdom that congestion is not really a problem. And actually there are some folks in here that agree with that, but I've come to, and when we started this, my own sense was, okay, well, people come up to me with this all the time. Well, if congestion is such a problem, and let's use Los Angeles as the context, how come Los Angeles is continuing to grow despite having the worst congestion in the United States? Fair question. I want to answer that. And because I had to wrestle with that question. I had to figure it out after spending 20 years in urban economics. I had to figure out, all right, if I'm going to start writing about congestion, how can I explain why Los Angeles is growing, yet it's the most congested place in the country? And the answer, I think, is kind of interesting. But let's just, for the sake of argument, just go with me here that congestion is bad, and where it's going to get worse. And actually, I've actually came to the point where the conventional wisdom is that we can tolerate a certain level of congestion. And as an academic, this was really hard for me to get over, because I'm now at the point we can tolerate zero congestion. I really have adopted, personally and professionally, that we need as a policy goal zero congestion. That's actually a very hard thing to come over, because the cost, when you do the cost benefit, it doesn't always necessarily work out that way. And my academic friends still are sort of look at me askance and think of me as that weirdo. But really the story over the next 15 minutes is why I'm at that point, and why I think it's important that this become embedded in transportation policy everywhere in the United States. All right.